What's up, guys? So I'm going to be doing a NFL quarterback tier list. I've been seeing a lot of these, and a lot of them have been getting me really upset with some of the rankings that have been put on. I've seen some people disrespect, for example, Carson Wentz a ton. And let me just start because I don't want to give too much away. So we'll start just with the first quarterback, Alex Smith. Alex Smith is the definition of average. He had a great season with Kansas City when he had all the weapons around him, but he's not a quarterback. He basically is camouflaged with the team that he's in. If he's on a good team, he'll be good. If he's on a bad team, he could be terrible, like some of his years in San Francisco. Moving on, we have Josh Allen. Josh Allen definitely is in the unknown category, and he could either be below average all the way up to above average, but I don't think that with his accuracy concerns that he'll ever be a elite or borderline elite quarterback, which I hate to say because he's one of my favorite quarterbacks, but probably the best highlight tape type of quarterback, maybe besides Cam Newton or Aaron Rodgers. Then we have Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, I think, is at least above average. You could make a case that Baker is borderline elite. The only reason I don't put him in borderline elite is because he kind of beat up on bad defenses last year. He had one win against a playoff team, which was the Ravens, but they only scored 9 points. It was a 96 game, plus they were playing against Joe Flacco, not Lamar. So I'm going to put him in above average, but if he shows that he can play just as well against the better defenses in the league, not defenses like the Falcons and the Bengals, who we absolutely crushed last year, then he'll definitely be borderline elite. Moving on to Big Ben. Big Ben is definitely borderline elite. I would say that the only reason he's not elite is because he does throw a lot of interceptions, but I think that he's the best borderline elite quarterback that I can think of. I think he's right at the cusp of elite. He's become underrated, but this year specifically, especially when James Conner was out, he had to carry the load like an unbelievable amount. He passed more than any other quarterback in the league by far. So he's borderline elite, 5,000 yards, 37 touchdowns last year. Drew Brees is elite category for sure. He has some of the best stats in the regular season. He's kind of a Peyton Manning type where in the postseason he has had a tendency to fall off just a little bit, at least in recent years, but obviously he won the Super Bowl and he didn't play poorly. He just had a bad second half against the Rams, second half in OT. But Drew Brees is definitely an elite quarterback. I don't think there's any argument that he's not. Cam Newton, this is one that is definitely controversial. I've seen some people put him in below average, which is crazy. A lot in borderline elite and above average, some in average. I'm going to put him in above average. Last year, when he was healthy, it was one of his best years. It was his best year, at least passing the ball. He hurt his shoulder, and it was obvious that he could barely throw the ball, 45 yards. So I think he's above average. I don't think he's borderline elite. He doesn't have the same athleticism, I wouldn't say. He doesn't run as much, but he has matured as a passer, at least a good amount. Now we have Derek Carr. Derek Carr is tough because I'm not sure if I want to put him below average or average, but Derek Carr to me is average, definitely worse than Alex Smith. It's actually funny because Alex Smith gets rep as, an underneath passer. He doesn't really throw the ball deep, but Derek Carr is every bit as much a conservative quarterback as Alex Smith. He even had a game last year against, I think, the Seahawks where he threw the ball to the left side behind the line of scrimmage more than half of his attempts, something like that. Ridiculous. It looked like they just ran a running back screen to the left side every single play. But I don't think he's below average either. Certainly not above average, so I think he's low-end average. Kirk Cousins, I think, is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. He takes a lot of crap for last year not making the playoffs with the Vikings, but the truth was the offensive line was terrible, and he actually was pretty good. He put up good numbers. So he's above average. I'm very confident he's above average. He's definitely better than average quarterbacks like Alex Smith or Derek Carr, but I don't think he's close to borderline elite either. And as far as his ranking between Cam and Baker goes, I would definitely put him just below those guys. And Baker and Cam have more potential, but Kirk is still a good quarterback. Jameis Winston is below average. I think that early in his career, there was a lot of buzz surrounding him and his potential, but it's just as obvious now. He's an interception machine. If you get replaced by Fitzpatrick, even though Fitzpatrick was playing great, he's actually similar to Fitzpatrick, but the guy just throws so many picks. And when he throws, he doesn't have a strong arm, and it almost seems like he's got small hands, because a lot of times, like in college, like he wound back and the ball just flew out of his hands. And sometimes in the NFL, he's got super wobbly passes that go nowhere near a target, where it feels like the ball slipped or he didn't have control. So he's below average. He does have potential. I do like Bruce Arians a lot, but it's been 5 years and he hasn't shown us much, so he's definitely below average. So Dak Prescott, I'm going to put average, and I'm going to put him right next to Alex Smith. I think he and Alex Smith are very similar, both pretty good runners. Alex Smith's probably a better runner, actually. But Dak is definitely average. A lot of people are putting him in above average, which is pretty crazy to me. He had a few good games with Amari Cooper when they traded for him last year, but that was enough to put him in above average. And a big concern with Dak is that it's never good when a player's best year is his rookie year, and that is Dak to a T. Sam Darnold is unknown at this point, but he's better than Josh Allen. Sam Darnold, he had a really good close to season, much like almost all the rookie quarterbacks. But I do have concerns about his arm strength, his accuracy. I think he's overrated. I think he was an overrated prospect. But his close this season was super strong, so I'm going to put him in unknown but above Josh Allen. A lot of people put him in average, but I think the average actually sells him short, because I think his potential is at least above average. Eli Manning is below average. He's better than Jameis Winston, I would say. But the guy has been done for probably 5-6 years now. He's just terrible. He can't throw the ball deep at all. And I get that his receivers have been awful, but Odell Beckham, he relied on Odell Beckham way too much. I'm just throughout the last few years, but he's a below average quarterback. He's a safe quarterback, but he still throws picks. So it's like, imagine if Alex Smith and Dak Prescott played the same way, but they threw a ton of picks. Fitzmagic is below average. He has games where he's elite, and he has games where he's literally 2 tiers below average. And he's never shown, besides that 1 year with the Jets, that he can be good for an extended period of time. Not to mention that the Dolphins have really no good receivers at all. I just don't think that Kenny Stills is a good number one receiver at all. So he's below average. I expect him to have a pretty terrible year this year. Nick Foles is average, but I'm going to put him above the other average quarterbacks. He is a lot like Fitzpatrick, just a much better version in the way that he's kind of a gunslinger. And he benefited a lot from Philadelphia having a ton of big body receivers like Alshon Jeffrey. He depended on Alshon Jeffrey to win 50-50 balls a lot. I think that when he's playing well, he's above average or maybe even borderline elite. But when he's playing bad, he's below average. So not a lot of consistency with him. And just from a game standpoint, he's got really good accuracy, not the greatest arm strength, and he has absolutely no mobility. So he's high average. You got to put him at least high average because of the Super Bowl. Jared Goff is extremely hard one, because if you were to just look at his numbers, he would be borderline elite. I think that a ton of his success, most of his success is due to Sean McVay's offense and play calling. He got exposed by the Patriots, and really the entire second half of the season he was awful. But I still think he's a little bit better than average. So I'm going to put him at the very back end of above average. And I definitely think that Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Jared Goff. Jared Goff, he hasn't really changed his game all that much in the last 2 years. It's just a lot of open receivers in LA. Those are just my thoughts. Matt Ryan is definitely borderline elite. He's become underrated. People forget just that 2 years ago he won MVP and had an unreal season. He broke the single season passer rating record. And this year he was great as well. I think he had like 38 touchdowns to 7 picks. It's not his fault that the defense is terrible. So he's borderline elite. I think he's behind Ben because of just Ben is stronger arm. He can do more. I would say Matt Ryan maybe has a little bit better decision making, but Ryan is definitely better than above average. And if you put him in elite, I wouldn't complain. Jimmy Garoppolo is the most overrated quarterback in the NFL. I would put him in average. I think 49er fans, they've got to be at this point the most delusional fans in the NFL. They're like the Nets fans of the NFL. They think that they have this young core and that they're going to be great, but really they're very far away. And Jimmy Garoppolo, he's played 8 games. He's played less games, started less games than Darnold and Josh Allen. Definitely Darnold. I'm not sure about Josh Allen, but you can't put him in unknown because he's like 29 years old right now. It's ridiculously old. I think he's average. I do think that he's high-end average, though, just as a player, but that's really more of me. People would get upset. No, I'll put him behind Nick Foles because Nick Foles won the Super Bowl, and Nick Foles had great seasons before. Jimmy Garoppolo had a great 5-game stretch where he only threw 6 touchdowns or 7 touchdowns to 5 picks. So incredibly overrated is Jimmy Garoppolo. Joe Flacco is below average. He's better than Fitzpatrick or Jameis. I think he's a little bit worse than Eli. I'm a huge Steeler fan. Don't think that I only put Ben in a borderline because I'm a Steeler fan, but watching Flacco against the Steelers, it's obvious that he misses guys all the time, guys who are wide open. There was a play this year when they were playing the Steelers. It was in Baltimore. They had Lamar Jackson actually play. He ran a route, Lamar, while Flacco was still quarterback, though. And Lamar was wide open, right side of the end zone, no one around him. And he was only like 10 yards away from Flacco. There's nobody near him. And Flacco just didn't see him. You can't do that for an NFL quarterback. That's an easy touchdown. They didn't even score a touchdown. They were at like the 3-yard line. They ended up kicking a field goal, and they lost that game. And it was pretty close. So Flacco's below average. I think that he's kind of fairly rated right now. I think people think of him as average, but he's definitely below average in my opinion. Case Keenum is below average. I'll even put him below Fitzpatrick. He was all right with Minnesota, but his success in Minnesota has become overstated for sure. He only had 22 touchdowns that year. And then in Denver, he was just exposed completely. There's a reason that Denver traded for Joe Flacco, although Joe Flacco may be just as bad. But Keenum, very limited arm strength, no athleticism whatsoever, or not none, but very little. He's below average. Lamar Jackson's unknown. I think Lamar is worse than Josh Allen because Lamar has an average arm at best, and then you combine that with terrible accuracy and not really knowing the game. He's not as bad as people say is at reading defenses, etc., but he is pretty bad. I think his success this year, he only threw for like 140 yards per game. You can't win in the NFL like that consistently. He got exposed in the playoff game against the Chargers. Once teams start game planning, because when they were winning the games at the end of the season, they were running for like 250, 300, maybe even 300 yards per game. That's never going to happen over a course of a 16-game season. So I think he's unknown. I'm just going to put him unknown because I can't say for sure. Maybe he's the next Mike Vick. But I expect him to be below average a year from now. Phillip Rivers is borderline elite. However, I don't think that he's as good as Matt Ryan or Big Ben. So he's at the bottom of borderline elite. He's had some good teams throughout his career. Recently, the teams have been good and then early in his career, but he's never been able to make a Super Bowl, and his postseason performances have been not to par with his regular season. So that's why I have him at the bottom of borderline elite. Andrew Luck is borderline elite. A lot of people have him in elite, and I just think that's crazy. First of all, his availability is maybe worse than any other quarterback in the league. He missed basically a year and a half, I think, which was like 26 months without playing in a game. He had a comeback here this year, but he's never been good once he gets deeper into the playoffs. He has had some good early round, like wildcard playoff games, like against the Bengals in his sophomore year, but he's become overrated. I think he's actually worse than Phillip Rivers. I think him and Rivers are probably exchangeable. Another thing with Luck is that maybe it's just me, but it certainly feels like anytime there's any kind of weather that's not just clear, like in a dome or no rain or anything, if it's cold or if it's snowing, he's awful. He was awful against Kansas City this playoffs. I mean, he was just terrible. He was as bad as I've ever seen Andrew Luck play. And he has had years where he's thrown a bunch of picks. So consistency, not as good as the other borderline elite quarterbacks. And his playoff performances haven't been as good. So I think he's low end of borderline elite, which is controversial because a lot of people, I would say most people, have him in elite. Marcus Mariota, I think, is at the very top of below average. He's been in the league. He's a lot like Jameis. Only difference is that he's been injured a lot, but he hasn't progressed nearly enough for someone who's been in the league as long as he has. He showed flashes at times, but he has gotten worse almost. He threw more picks than touchdowns 2 years ago, and this year his ratio was like 17-15 in favor of touchdowns, something not good like that, and not a very accurate passer. And he doesn't run as much as I think he should, considering how good of an athlete he is. Mitch Trubisky is average. I think he's better than Derek Carr. I think he's better than Alex Smith, Dak, or Carr, but I don't think he's as good as Foles or Jimmy G. He's become overrated. He had good stats, but his Pro Football Focus grades were, his passing grade was the worst in the league this year, which is kind of interesting since his passing stats weren't awful, but he's become overrated like Luck. He's a good athlete. I just don't see him being good enough to make the Bears a great team, especially since they don't have great receivers. I think Allen Robinson's his number one. That's not very good. Patrick Mahomes is elite and better than Drew Brees. 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, and I don't care that it was his first year starting. I don't think that that's the case to make him borderline elite. He's definitely elite. MVP this year. No explanation needed there. Andy Dalton has become kind of oddly underrated. I'm going to put him above Jimmy G, actually. He's become underrated because almost every time I've seen a tier list, he's been in below average. I think that he's 100% at least average. He's had years where he's been very good. I'm a Steelers fan, so I watch him play all the time. He's pretty good. He's a good passer. He's like a better Eli Manning in a way. And his numbers are good. He had good numbers last year. availability is a bit of a concern, and the playoffs performances from him haven't been great. So he's definitely not above average, but I definitely don't think he's below average either. Russell Wilson, clearly elite. I'm going to say that he's not as good as Patrick Mahomes, but he's better than Drew Brees. He's developed into one of the best passers in the NFL. Came into the league, he was a great passer. I think if you made Russell Wilson 6'5", he could be the greatest quarterback ever. Great arm strength, great accuracy, unbelievable athleticism, great decision making. When he runs to throw, he doesn't run to gain yards on the ground, but he can if you need to. In fact, this year, his rushing yards fell off a ton, but his passing went up like crazy. I think 35 touchdowns, 34 touchdowns with only 6 picks. So he's 100% elite. I think you're crazy if you don't put him there. Aaron Rodgers is elite, and I'm going to say he's better than Drew Brees right now, but I think they're interchangeable. 2 years ago, or maybe not 2 years, if 3 years ago, he would be the top quarterback in the league, no doubts. But his play has kind of fell off. His mechanics have been spotty at best at times. He's had injuries that are mounting on him. A lot of his kind of reduction in his success, you could say, could be attributed to Mike McCarthy, but I think that's only part of it. I think Rodgers has fell off just a tiny bit, but he's still elite. I think for sure. If he's not elite, then I think that list is wrong. Josh Rosen is at... I'm going to put him... This is obviously unknown, but I'm going to put him right above Lamar Jackson. Actually, I'm going to put him below Lamar Jackson. At least if Lamar Jackson sucks, I guess you could turn him into a receiver, but Josh Rosen was terrible. His offensive line sucked, but he still missed a ton of throws. His receivers weren't bad. Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, those are two pretty good receivers. David Johnson's a good receiving back, and he was awful. He's statistically the worst quarterback in the league, and he provides no real threat on the ground either. So Matthew Stafford is above average in my opinion. He's above Kirk and Jared Goff, but he's become underrated a lot like Kirk. He's a good quarterback, strong arm, athletic. I mean, not athletic, but he's mobile enough. He's had no running backs until this year with Kerryon Johnson, but his entire career, he's had zero running back help. And his receivers, especially now that they just got rid of Golden Tate, you got Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay. Those are two pretty good receivers, but I don't think anybody would say that Golladay or Marvin Jones is a solid number one receiver. You'd be crazy to think that. And Stafford still puts up decent stats. He's an above average. Tannehill is below average. I actually think that he's second best below average. He can't really throw that well. He can run. He's athletic as hell. He ran like a 4.56. He was a receiver in college, but oddly, he does not run at all. It's just like maybe he's in his own head or something. And availability is a major concern with him. At this point, he's a backup, so I don't even know why he's on this list. So below average. Tom Brady, elite. At this point in his career, I think that he is at the bottom of elite, but 6-time Super Bowl champion, arguably the best quarterback of all time. I think most people would say best quarterback of all time. Played not as good as usual this year, but at the same time, it's not like he was like Peyton Manning in his last year when he won a Super Bowl where he completely fell off. He's still very good. And I don't even think that he's going to continue to fall off. I think he'll be just as good as he usually is this year, even with the retirement of Gronk. Deshaun Watson is above average. I'm going to put him right below Stafford. Actually, I'm going to put him above Goff and Cousins. But he's become overrated. A lot of people have him in borderline elite. He puts up good numbers, but a lot of that is D-Hop, DeAndre Hopkins. He's solid, but he's not crazy accurate. He's not crazy athletic. He's not He doesn't have a crazy strong arm. He's just good at a lot of things, but he's not great at anything, and that's why I don't think he's borderline elite. Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is at the top of above average. I've gone back and forth between borderline elite and above average. A lot of people have him in an average, which is absolutely insane. He's at least above average, top of above average for me. His arm strength is great. He's a prototypical quarterback, athletic. The only concern with him, and he's put up great numbers even last year, is his availability, which is what keeps him from borderline elite. He's almost like Andrew Luck light. A little bit worse at everything than Andrew Luck. Or his production isn't as good as Luck. But he did almost win MVP. He's at least above average, and I think he's better than Cam and Baker. Haskins, obviously unknown, but if I had to rank him, I would take him over everybody but Darnold. People's opinions on him, there's a great range of that. I think that he'll be all right. He's a little bit overhyped, but a lot of times he's underrated. Depends on who you ask. But he's definitely better than Daniel Jones. Drew Lock, I'm going to put him right below Josh Allen. He's a typical, strong arm, potential type quarterback. I think he's pretty good. I thought better than Daniel Jones in my opinion. So, I'll put him unknown. I think everybody gets that. Kyler Murray, he is at the top of unknown for me. He's a great quarterback. If it weren't for his height, which he's 5'10", and height for quarterbacks is overrated. I mean, it's not like if you're below 6 feet tall that the game is impossible for you and you can't see over the line, something like that. So if Russell Wilson, who's got at the combine, they measured at the same. Wilson was a tiny bit taller, like a quarter of an inch, but a few pounds lighter. Basically the same measurements. If Russell Wilson, he does it great, and he's had bad offensive lines too. So Kyler's at the top of unknown for me. I would take him over all of these guys. Daniel Jones is at the bottom of unknown. I'll put him below Lamar and below Josh Rosen, because at least Josh Rosen's got a great arm, great mechanics. The Giants really messed up taking Daniel Jones. He's got to be the most vanilla prospect ever. He's like average to below average at everything, and he doesn't have any redeeming qualities besides his height. And have you heard that his coach knows the Mannings? If quarterback prospect's biggest strength is that his coach is training with the Mannings, then that's not a good quarterback prospect. So that's my list. Tell me what you guys think. I think this list is really solid. Looking at it now, if I had to change anyone, I think this list is pretty solid. I would actually, I'll put Tannehill. Tannehill is worse than Flacco. I think Jameis is worse than him. And I would say Keenum. Keenum is the worst potential starting quarterback in the league right now. So that's my list. Let me know what you think. So if you're still watching right now, thank you for watching.